How's it going, everybody? Welcome to this week's LUMIX Live, and we've got a really exciting conversation, one that I am very much looking forward to, as we have, the title says, a full conversation about talking on how to capture the solar eclipse that we have coming up. For those of us that are going to be within the path of, I believe it's called Path of Totality, I guess. This is going to be an amazing experience for a lot of people to photograph, to capture video of. But there's a lot of kind of nuance in, what level of kind of layout do you want to go with this, right? Do you want to just be able to grab your camera, go and just capture it nice and easy and simple and kind of enjoy the experience, which is definitely something you want to keep in mind with, opportunities like this? Or do you want to go all out and figure out, the full-blown planning side of it, the equipment needed for things like tracking and all that kind of fun stuff? So we have a special guest joining us today. He's been on the stream before, that we'll bring in a couple of minutes. But before we jump into that, I want to remind everybody about LUMIX Pro services. We have Red and Platinum available in the US. We have the Red tier, which is free. This is what's available once you get yourself a LUMIX camera. Follow the QR code on the screen, get yourself registered, and get your camera equipment protected there. If you're someone who likes to have higher level of service and support, take a look at the Platinum level membership. That's going to get you an extra tier of back-end support on your equipment, where you're going to get 2-day repairs with next-day shipping both ways, 20% off out of warranty repairs, so if you happen to damage your equipment, you've got some buffer there to help you replace your equipment. You also have annual sensor cleanings, lens calibrations, EVF cleanings, firmware updates, all the kind of maintenance stuff that if you want us to take care of it, you've got access to that. And you have an exclusive member hotline, which is available Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So lots of benefits there for you. I encourage you to take a look at those. We have links down in the description, as well as the QR codes that were up on the screen there. So, without further ado, let's bring Stephen Madow on to the broadcast. How's it going, Stephen? Very, very cool. Now, for the people that may not know you yet, could you give us a little background on what you photograph? Because clearly, being somewhere like in Cape Canaveral is a pretty... Oh, wait, I forgot to unmute you. Let's fix that. I totally forgot to unmute you. Let's do that one more time. Hey, everybody, this is Stephen Madow. Stephen, welcome to the stream.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for having me on the stream today. Not a virtual background behind me. I am actually out at Kennedy Space Center. There's a rocket launch in about 3 hours. And besides shooting eclipses, I also shoot quite a bit of rocketry.
Very, very cool. Very cool. Now, for those that may have not seen the previous conversations that you and I had, could you give us a little background about, like, what you do, what kind of photography, videography do you like to do? And honestly, I would love to hear how you got into doing this stuff as well.
Yeah, so, I mean, I like a bunch of different genres of photography, cityscape, landscape, travel stuff, but where I've been spending a lot of my focus over the past few years is on rocket launch photography, space photography, cool alignments with the sun and the moon, and these sorts of things that are really fun, take a lot of planning, but can get some really cool images out of them. So really, the way that I got into rocket launch photography, I've been living in Orlando since about 2007, so coming up on the better part of 2 decades now. And while I was in college, started randomly seeing rocket launches going off at night, and then realized, hey, this is something that, I can go look up a schedule, get out, try to go see some of these up close. And then got a LUMIX G7 with the hope of doing a long exposure shot back in 2014. threw it on a tripod and was able to get a shot of the streak of a rocket. And really, it took off, excuse the pun, from there. Now it's a pretty deep arsenal of maybe 10 Lumix cameras.
That's pretty cool. I know when you were on here last, we were talking about some of those images that you've captured for like I think it was like the SpaceX launches, the is it ULA is the other launch stuff,
Yep.
and then obviously you're there at NASA right now. So it kind of was like perfectly fitting to bring you back on. I know as you messaged me in Instagram about this, about we've got this amazing event coming up, and I know, like myself, who doesn't do a lot of this kind of photography, it's an amazing experience that if we've got these cameras, we've got time, to be able to capture it. There's going to be a lot of time depending on where you are for the actual event. Learning from someone who has the experience on this, like what kind of equipment do you use? What kind of recommendations do you have? And as I said in the beginning, going from that, like, hey, I just happen to have maybe just 100 to 400 in my G9 Mark II. What do I need to make that kit work? Versus, I know you sent me some images of your rig that you have, and we can talk about that as well. So,
Awesome.
yeah, so I guess we can start it by what is the current equipment that you are utilizing for this kind of work?
Yeah, so I think when we think through eclipses in general, right, like there's a few different phases of the eclipse and different things that you might need for those things. So kind of just to break it down, there's like the partial phase, which is when the sun keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller as the moon gradually blocks more of it. There's the amazing totality, right? So like the thing where you see that corona, you can take your eclipse glasses off and actually look at it. And then there's all of these phenomenon that happen surrounding totality that we can talk about as well. But really, when we talk about the partial phases of an eclipse, if you don't already have this, what you need to do today, like while you are watching the live stream, is go get a solar filter. If you're using a telephoto lens, so really anything over 50 millimeters on micro four thirds or 100 millimeters full frame, absolutely need a solar filter. I highly recommend Thousand Oaks Optical. They have these great push-on filters, which are advantageous when you remove them for totality instead of having to screw them off. So that's awesome. But if you've got an ND and you're thinking about using an ND, don't do it for telephoto. If you want to do like a wide angle composite, which we might have a photo of one of those as well, where the sun's a little bit smaller in each frame. Yeah, like this one that I shot back in last October during an annular eclipse. And you can get away with an ND for the wide angle one. So if you've got 10, 16 stops, that's fine. You're not going to damage your sensor because the sun is taking up 1/100th of the entire frame, same as shooting, a sunset or something like that. But for telephoto, you absolutely need a solar filter. So that's kind of thing one. And then when we're talking about telephoto version of eclipses, you need something to put your camera on, right? So you probably want a tripod. If you happen to have a star tracker or a telescope mount or something like that, it will just make your life a little bit easier, right? You're able to track the sun and have a mount automatically go through the sky throughout the eclipse. But you really don't need one of those to get really cool eclipse photos. In fact, what we're looking at right now from the annular eclipse, I did that all manually by hand without any sort of special tracker on a tripod with a geared head. So I really love Manfrotto's geared head where you can just kind of spin things around and keep things in frame. That's kind of maybe a little bit of an intro to this.
Yeah, no, totally. And so with the filter side of it, right? So it's definitely one of those things that like I want to make sure we spend a little bit of time on, because it's very easy for people to, I think, not understand what maybe they're buying if you're new into this, right? Like as an example, right? So I have one of these K&F filter things here, right? And what I noticed when you and I started talking about this was that, you have a lot of companies that are advertising these as solar filters, which, from my understanding, isn't really that accurate. Because the truth is, some of these filters, this is just literally an ND, what is it, 100,000, 10,000, whatever.
Yep.
Now, when looking at filtration for it, what are the things that having the right filter is going to help you with versus if you're, not using it? Aside from the fact that we know that you can damage your sensor if you're not using the right filters and these kinds of things. So, like, what is it about that Thousand Oaks filter that is the reason why you want to go with a proper filter?
All right, we're going to push my scientific knowledge here, but I love it. So my understanding of how this works is that there's different spectrums of light, right? So there's what we call visible light, and then there's infrared and then ultraviolet on the other side of this spectrum of light. And what NDs do, they're really specifically focused towards visual light. They help us do long exposures and all of these great things. But when you're pointing your camera directly at the sun, the brightest thing in the sky that you could possibly point it at, being able to block out all types of light in an even manner is pretty important. And then on top of that, from an aesthetic standpoint, especially if you're shooting video, but also for stills, it's nice to have a filter that has great color to it. That's one of the things that I'm not sponsored by Thousand Oaks, but one of the things that I love about their filters is that in that image that Sean was showing a second ago, that's pretty much the color that I get out of the filter. It's, this nice aesthetically pleasing orange-yellow color that just like represents the sun, right? Whereas if you're using an ND or even some other solar filters that might be approved, oftentimes it will be sort of white. Now, of course, you can change the light balance in Lightroom, but it is nice just having that. And maybe if you go to the picture of my rig for a second, not to get too far ahead of it, but there might be a newer one that I sent with a bit of a better view of it. If not, no big deal.
Yeah, I can take a look and see if I've got that.
Cool. We'll get to that, but it's got a nice picture of what the filter looks like on the front. And again, you need the filter for the partial phases, and you need to remove the filter about 20 seconds before totality, anywhere from 0 to 20 seconds before totality. And certainly a push-on filter is going to be a really good bet so that you're not disturbing your setup. You're incredibly excited looking at this amazing event in the sky. I can tell you from personal experience, like, it is overwhelming and amazing, and you want to be thinking about your cameras as much as possible. And like, traditional advice is, if this is your first solar eclipse, don't photograph it. But like, you're watching this stream, you're a photographer, you want to photograph this thing, that's totally fine. You can both photograph it and have a really great time visually observing the eclipse without the photography getting in the way.
Yeah. So I know there used to be a number of years ago, there are alternatives that I know that people have used before for capturing the eclipse, and one of them, for those that have maybe ever played around with this concept, was basically taking Mylar and covering over the front element of it. With something like that, now obviously that's not a high tech function of this, right? I mean, let's face it. The first one I ever shot, I literally took a Pop-Tart wrapper because it's Mylar and did like the old school. You fold it and then you're taping it to your lens and stuff. The big point, I think, here with a lot of anyone that's on here watching it, because just like you pointed out, if you're watching this, you probably have an interest in wanting to photograph it, is making sure that while those particular kind of workarounds can kind of work, and you're probably not going to cause damage to your camera, but just as a, big open statement here, if you do damage your camera doing this without the right filter, that's not something that a manufacturer is going to cover, so you want to make sure you're careful with it. Getting ahead of the rush to purchase these kinds of accessories is a big deal. I know here in Austin, we are in the path of totality, so it's going to be really awesome to experience it. And I can tell you, as of about 2 months ago, when I started looking around online trying to find filters for the cameras, they were getting very hard to find, and you're starting to see people jack up the prices on them. So keep that in mind, everybody, when you're looking at this stuff.
Today is the time to buy them. And Thousand Oaks, this company that I've mentioned several times, so hats off to them.
Yeah.
If you go to their website and try to order one right now, like, it might be a little bit borderline if you can get it, but I think that I saw on Amazon yesterday that they just sell like a 4x4-inch sheet of this stuff. So you could actually turn that into a home-built filter. And it's like this 4x4 sheet, which will work on the 100 to 400 lens, the 200 lens, whatever lens you have. Was like $16 with 2-day shipping on Amazon. So definitely before that goes out of stock, pick one up if you think that you might be shooting the Eclipse. Today's the day.
Yeah. So now, you know, we're talking about the lenses and stuff too, and I think you know, like someone like myself who, again, you know, it's not a specialty area of what I photograph, but a lot of times people do just assume, you know, I'm gonna grab an ultra telephoto lens because I want to get, you know, fill the frame with the event. And you brought up a really good point before about thinking, you know, also shooting wide angle, doing things like composites, doing multiple exposures, time lapses to capture the image through. When you go to capture an Eclipse or an event like this, how many cameras do you typically deploy for it?
So during the last annular eclipse, I think I was 4 or 5 cameras. Annular eclipses, from that picture that we were looking at earlier, the moon is further away from the Earth. It doesn't fully cover the sun from where we're standing, so you get what's called a ring of fire in the sky, which is that top image within here. During a total solar eclipse, the moon's closer to the Earth, blocks it out, and you can do some really cool things. So for this eclipse, I think I'll be bringing like 8 cameras, 4 or 5 of them, well, 5 or 6 of them focused towards stills, 1 towards video, and then a few for behind the scenes, maybe stills and photos that I'll automate. This is a way over the top setup. Certainly not necessary to be able to get some cool content out of your Eclipse experience. There's probably 3 things that I would prioritize. If you've got 3 cameras, and if you've got 1 and some of this gear, maybe like pick 1 or 2 of these that make sense. So first thing is the telephoto shot. So there should be a picture with like a blue background that's just centered on the Eclipse, which is showing that one. Yep. So this is showing off the corona. This is like the classic Eclipse shot that you probably are after and interested in. And this was shot at 300 millimeters on a GX8 back in 2017. So 600 millimeters full frame. You could easily do something like this at 200/400 or even 150. No problem there. And this part of the shot is with no solar filter because it's during totality. And really, if I were to be there without the crazy automation software that I use, which we haven't talked about too much, what I would do is just dial in a 7-shot bracket, probably underexposed a little bit with a handheld wired remote, and just press go, look at it, make sure that it worked for like 20 seconds of the Eclipse. Maybe keep clicking that while you're looking at the Eclipse, but like enjoy the Eclipse, and that's probably great. Or you could even do a version of that where you do like a 7-shot bracket starting off at -4 and then just quickly move on one of the dials, move it to +4 as the base of it. But ultimately, you're trying to get as much data, as much dynamic range as possible so that you can later on bring it in and make decisions in post-processing while you're not having to worry about too much in the field. And then probably my final thought on that of like this really simple telephoto Eclipse setup is go on the shorter end of focal length, because you can always crop. Like these cameras, like the G9 Mark II has, I think, 24, 25 megapixels. Sean, I'm sure that you know that answer. Plenty of room to crop in a little bit, even with 20 megapixels on many of the other cameras. But what you want to do is understand the direction that the sun and the moon are moving in, and kind of frame so that they are at, you know, it's going to be like the bottom left of your frame, and they sort of move through it with still a lot of headroom around on all sides. What that's going to do it's going to make it so that you don't have to touch your tripod during all of totality. So the sun will stay in frame for those 4 minutes. You just click away on your brackets at 200 millimeters or even 150, and you'll be able to do exactly what you want with it in post and get a really cool image out of it.
Nice.
So that was kind of like one of the things, one of the shots. Another shot that you can do are these wide angle composites. So you could use like time-lapse mode, or just set a timer to go off every 5 minutes or whatever. I think that there's a solar eclipse timer that can tell you take a shot every, every 5% or 1% or whatever you tell it to do. But you can certainly manually do this with a timer, and maybe shoot like a 3-shot bracket with the sun in it. When you get to totality with that camera, what you'll want to do is take off your filter, get like, again, like a nice wide bracket of like maybe 7 shots of the sun with the corona surrounding it, with the beautiful blueness of the sky, and then you can just composite in all of these shots to make it come together as one composition, as one piece of art, maybe, if you want to think about it that way. Just super easy to do. You just load these into Photoshop, use the lighten mode on those layers, and you're off to the races, and you have a pretty cool image.
Yeah. No, it's such a cool kind of concept. Like the like you're saying, is that like thinking outside of the box from, not just focusing on, just like before, no pun intended, not just focusing on using just telephoto, but branching out and understanding that, for those that I think like to do as much and get it as right in camera as you can, it sounds like this is a type of photography that you're probably not going to get it the way you want it right out of camera. You're going to probably want to do some post work with it, right?
Yeah, you'll certainly want to do post work to bring out the dynamic range, or if you're creating a composite like this where you're bringing together multiple shots. But even if you're shooting like that 7-shot bracket that I'm recommending, you can still just pick your favorite frame out of that, bring it into Lightroom, do some basic adjustments to it, and get a really cool image out of it. That's just allowing you 7 different chances to get it right in camera and to be able to work with that base image. Or if you want to be more advanced with it, and if you like playing around in Photoshop, cool, you can sort of manually composite those together and show off, the light that's right next to the sun that's going to be the brightest, while still retaining detail in that outer corona. So lots of options that will build for you.
Yeah. So you had mentioned before that, like, there's also like a software component to some of this, and as we mentioned, like you have a rig and a star tracker, things like that. So if someone were going into maybe a little bit higher level of this, or if they already have like a star tracker, what kind of advice do you have for someone that wants to use those components for it?
Yeah, so part one is that if you have a star tracker, or this is like a Celestron telescope mount that I've turned into a really easy version of a sun tracker, but what that's going to help you with is keeping the sun in frame. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? So it doesn't have to stay perfect for the entire 3.5+ hours, whatever it is, from the start, which is called C1, when the moon first starts covering up the sun, all the way to C4, when the moon's totally gone. And you can readjust it throughout. What my goal with this is to make sure that I'm not having to play around with it and do adjustments that much. And then for my ultra telephoto shot, so I do plan on doing one as zoomed in as possible at 400 millimeters plus a 2x teleconverter to get some really cool eclipse phenomenon. We'll keep that part for at least the 4 minutes of totality, and that's really my goal there. So solar trackers make tracking the sun easier during the eclipse. Now, the other cool thing that you can do is automation through software, which I did in 2017 and plan on doing this year as well. So this application is called Solar Eclipse Maestro. It's a Mac app. I think that there's something called Eclipse Orchestrator that works on Windows. But back in 2017, I actually worked with the developer of this application to bring in support for LUMIX cameras. So we went back and forth with probably 50 different builds of this software. I sent him property analyses and all of these different things to make sure that this software, through the tethering capabilities of LUMIX cameras, could function. And now it's at a really stable point where it functions incredibly nicely and amazingly, natively and like automatically supported the G9 Mark II. So I plugged that in and I'm like, well, this camera just came out. I don't know if it's going to work in this software. It worked beautifully. And I still sent Javier, who creates the software, some information about that camera, but it worked really nicely for automation. So the one caveat for this piece of software is you will need an Intel Mac running a little bit older of an operating system. So in my case, my wife got a new laptop recently, and I was like, let's hold on to your old Intel laptop just for this purpose. So we'll be bringing this one out to Texas with us. But if you're a little bit on the nerdier side like I am, and you can handle some basic scripting, there's essentially a text file that controls all of this. So you put in all of these details, and there's a lot of technical terms and learning that you can do. I was mentioning C1 earlier, which is the start of the Eclipse, the first contact, C2, C3, right on each side of totality, into C4. What you can do is tell it to do these different exposures for different parts of the Eclipse, which is super cool. So for me, I'll have it take per camera about 300 automated shots at completely different exposures throughout totality. So over the course of 4 minutes, it's just going to constantly be changing things. I'll go from extremes of 800 ISO f22 to try to get some interesting effects during what's called the diamond ring, or even to be able to get earth shine at f2.8 with some boosted ISOs and 3-second shutter, 3-second shutter speeds, all the way down to capturing this phenomenon called Bailey's beads, which are bright, where you've got to go to like 1/8000th at f8 and ISO 100. So this software is just going to be changing all of that stuff. This would be really, really challenging to do sometimes when you only have 3 or 4 seconds to make these changes, or even less, to do that by hand while you're excited and overwhelmed by the Eclipse. So if you're going for these advanced phenomenon, or if you just want kind of an easier and more planned day, this sort of software is amazing.
That's pretty crazy. I mean, it's nuts how much I guess software and technology has now kind of really over the years been like evolved to work and make these things that much easier for you. So if you'd said earlier, and it's something that I have a pretty strong feeling about as well, which is that for many of us, I think this is like once in 20 years that this is something that people are typically going to experience. I think was a figure I heard.
Yeah. So the next one of these in the U.S. is in the 40s, although you can travel to them.
Hey, there you go. So, it's like, yes, capturing these kinds of experiences, it's definitely something really fun. It's an awesome kind of image and video and piece of content that you can add to your repertoire and have like kind of in that backlog. But I think it's definitely important for everyone to remember to definitely experience this situation. And as all of many of the areas where, that are in the path of totality, follow local regulations and laws and all that kind of stuff. If cops are telling you and like everyone is kind of warning people to stay off the road, be very careful while you're going to go out and do this. We don't want to hear someone say like, hey, I saw in that YouTube video, I should go out, and just please everyone just be very careful when you're going out to do this stuff. But with doing, all of the kind of work where you want to take these images and have the brackets and stuff like that, what kind of software do you use for the merging of the photos? Are you using Photoshop, or are you using I know that there's like planetary tools that exist for aligning images and stuff. Do you have a preference in what you work with those?
Yeah, so It depends which kind of image we're talking about, but I tend to stay in Lightroom and Photoshop for all of this. There are some really advanced planetary tools that will help with alignment. You can get really crazy into the deep side of this and start combining lights and darks and flats and all of these different things that exist in these astronomical terms to bring together photos. But ultimately, right, like for that wide angle version, edit a little bit in Lightroom, pull it into Photoshop and combine the layers with lighten mode on the layers that you want to pull in of that bright sun. Really straightforward. Yep, that's exactly how this one came together. Probably gigabytes, like 50 gigabytes worth of total data, but was worth crunching through. And then for the Corona shot, so if you want to bring together all of that dynamic range, what I plan on doing this time is really just editing a bunch of these in Lightroom, pulling them into Photoshop, kind of manually aligning them, because even though my tracker is pretty good, it's not going to keep the sun perfectly center. And so I'll manually align them back together and then blend in, right? So I'll go into each layer and determine and sort of brush in, hey, for this layer, for the most center layer, I want my, dimmest exposure so that it's not overblown. And then for the trails all the way on the outside of the Corona, I might use something that was exposed differently and just hopefully be able to naturally blend those together. It's amazing. Your eye will actually see it more or less the way that I'm talking about combining it because of the dynamic range of our eyes, but there's just such difference in light on the extremes of this that being able to push the dynamic range even further than, 14 stops or 11 or 12 stops that a camera sensor might have is awesome.
Yeah.
And then if you go to the next one that I think was in there, like this is something called Earthshine, where you can actually see the moon blotting out the sun. This is something that I hope to do even better this time. With a longer eclipse, the moon should be a little bit more visible. But really, you can even combine this sort of photo with the other one to just these extreme differences of dynamic range.
No, it's definitely like so cool. And when taking taking account for the equipment, we talked about the G9 Mark II and that kind of platform. What are your recommendations or feelings on, do you have to have full frame for this? Is Micro Four Thirds good for it as well? Where would you recommend? Because even outside of that, we start going into some of those other questions like, would you use handheld high resolution shot or a tripod high res shot or any of those, kind of other modes that we have in the camera? So I'm curious what, how you approach it. Do you have a sensor format that you prefer to use with these or not?
Yeah. So I generally shoot Micro Four Thirds. I'm personally very happy with the performance of Micro Four Thirds. And one of the places where that platform excels is telephoto. And we're talking, of course, the more classic shots here on the telephoto side. So being able to just have the 100 to 400, just a nice light lens, easy to travel with, and throw that on the camera. This picture was shot with the 100 to 400 back in 2017, and that works out perfectly. And now when we're talking about the G9 Mark II, like the dynamic range is much better than the GX8 that this was shot on. Has much higher megapixel count and will work, I think, really nicely. I'm certainly prioritizing that in certain ways throughout my Eclipse planning as being one of my primary cameras alongside some G9.
Nice. Yeah. So, I honestly, there's such a cool, opportunity for everyone as we were saying. I know you've got a really cool location that you're at right now, getting ready to capture the rockets there. And we're gonna probably call the interview for now. Where can everyone check out your work? Where can they follow? Obviously, you're going to be out there capturing this. You got the rocket launch that you're capturing now. And I'm sure people want to be able to follow and check out the work that you're doing.
Yeah, so whatever platform you are, it's just at Stephen Madow. Instagram's my primary, but you can follow on Facebook, Instagram, X, Threads, Reddit, StephenMadow.com. I'm very fortunate to be the only person with my name living in the world, so I get first dibs at all of these handles.
Yeah, no, it's definitely awesome. And for everyone that's watching, if you want to support Stephen, we have his website linked down in the description. I know that you have some of your amazing images for sale as well, and it's one of those just really cool things, like when you see the breadth of work that you're doing, that it's such a cool different look from, like, the weddings, the real estate, the event photography that we see. You definitely have a cool level of art in the images and the compositions that you've created. So, like I was saying, I want to thank you for taking some time jumping on with me for the community and sharing some wisdom about capturing the solar eclipse. And yeah, I hope you have a great day out there at NASA and get some cool images today.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me on. This was so much fun as always, and wishing everybody clear skies that goes out for the total solar eclipse this year.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. So, yeah, everybody, thank you so much for jumping on with Stephen here with us. It's definitely such a cool experience to see. The work that Stephen does, the imagery that he captures, the just opportunities that he's been able to create with this. I'm going to take these off now since I don't need them anymore. So yes, I encourage you all to go take a look at Stephen's work. Check out his website. His name is in the description up on the top, or in the title, as well as there are some links down for Stephen's work in the description as well. So now let's jump through, because I saw a bunch of questions coming through and some conversations. So we're going to take the rest of the time today, for probably about another 15 or so minutes. And just kind of open up questions to everybody. There's some answers that I have based on what we were talking about earlier. So one of the first questions that I saw coming from Dieter is, I will go on a once-in-a-lifetime trip to film bald eagles. Would you prefer shooting vlog or natural? Which video format do you suggest? I do not film on SSD, but on a V90 card. Dieter, it's gonna depend on how much work you want to put in post. Vlog, if you're used to working in a logarithmic profile with the editing that would be required to color grade that footage. If not, if you're looking for something that's a little bit more just kind of quick, you can capture and have pretty much deliver ready. I am a proponent of the Leica 709 color profile. Or if it's content that you're going to create and it's, you're going to put it up on YouTube or Vimeo, or you're just going to play it right on a TV for the video stuff, you could always capture in the hybrid log gamma color profile. Those are going to be pretty turnkey profiles to record in. Hybrid log gamma is designed to be able to display properly on a standard dynamic range display, so like 709, but also it can play on HLG displays, so you get high dynamic range functions out of it. But yeah, those are probably the ones that I would recommend shooting in. Let's see here. Alan says, we used to shoot RAW and JPEG photos while recording video on the GH5 and other cameras, but now we can't on these newer, on the GH6 and the others. Did Lumix forget about that feature? No. Being able to grab stills while recording the video was something that was dropped a number of years ago. On the newer cameras, the way that you would do it now is because even at that point, it wasn't recording a full resolution image. At least while I've been working at Lumix, I've never had that. the system, what you can do is once you're playing back the video file, you can just click the button and save as still out. So that's how you would do it now. Chris Flores says, G9 Mark II has been struggling to AF when shooting through a net during baseball. Any tips? Yeah, so for that, Chris, if you take a look in the menus and you go to the near and far focus function, you can program those to various different buttons on the camera. In fact, I think I talked about and showed on a stream a little while ago about that. I'll look to see if I can find it and timestamp it for you. You can program near and far focus. That is exactly what that mode is designed for. Shooting through things like glass or netting, anywhere where you've got something that's big enough that a focus system can still grab to, and just kind of bypass that because it'll force it to look on the far side. That's what I would recommend. I think it's Makari. Says, how long is it safe to record video of solar eclipse using a 100K ND filter? So, for a lot of this stuff, like we were talking with Steven before, is ND filters can be okay, but you want to be careful with how telephoto you're being, where the image is being captured at, right? Filters, not all filters are designed alike, and when you start looking at what light spectrums are coming through the filter, what they're able to resist, what they're able to cancel out, that's why I would agree with Steven's recommendation of, I think it's 1,000 Oaks filters. If you get one of those, like he said, it's you can buy the sheets and make them yourself. Then you're not really going to have to worry about, time limits of recording. The truth is that any situation where you're going to be photographing or videoing something that is that bright of a light source, if you don't have the proper tools for it or what is recommended to be used, and ND filters are pretty universally not recommended to use. They're close. Some of them can fall within the category. You can run into that risk of where you're focusing a really bright spot of light right onto your sensor, and that's what can cause damage. So if you're going to use something like a 100K ND filter, like I said, I have this K&F filter that, again, on their website, they claim that it's a quote-unquote solar filter when may or may not be. That's where you want to just kind of make sure that the filter you're looking at is validated, that it's saying it's actually showing you what it's rated for. And then at that point, shouldn't really have that big of an issue. As Steven said, when you get to totality, that's where the filter can come off. So that saves time there. Just make sure you're watching your exposure for the video or the images that you want to capture. So. Another question here just joined. Can we use high-res shot mode during the eclipse? So, this is something that I touched on at the end of the interview. Technically, the handheld high-resolution shot mode in like the S5 Mark II, the Mark IIX, the G9 Mark II, even the GH6, yeah, they can shoot fast enough to merge those images together. The thing that you have to remember is that it's going to depend on what the magnification is that you're using on your lens. So if you're all the way out, like on the 100 to 400, if I'm all the way out at, the 400 millimeter, you have to account for the movement that you're making, right? Handheld high resolution shot, even tripod high res shot, which I wouldn't recommend doing tripod with telephoto because the sun's moving through the sky. You need to be a little careful with those because the movement is going to be greater than what the in-camera system can compensate for. Something that you can do to basically counteract this is you could do a similar concept to bracketing where you're taking a ton of frames and then you are aligning them to get you, either better dynamic range or you're offsetting and, basically using things like upresing that, exists in Photoshop, that exists in like Topaz, things like that. Some of those may give you a slightly better result because handheld in ultra telephoto, that's where you have to be much more stable than you think you do. And in a situation like this, I probably wouldn't recommend using it because the chances of not being able to create a high-res shot because of motion is going to be higher. And if you're capturing a bunch of these frames and you're struggling or you're fighting with the camera to capture the high-res shot in handheld, you're going to miss the opportunities. So if you shoot just regular images, following like what Steven was saying with the bracketing method, you're going to have a much better overall result because software upscaling's gotten relatively good if you need a much higher res image out of it. Makari says time-lapse or live view composite. You would, in a case like this, you would want to use time-lapse and not live view composite. If you use live view composite for, say, like the wide-angle shots where you're capturing the entire event, what you're going to end up getting out of the camera there is a streak of the sun and the moon going through. Because live view composite is designed to additively add the new bright information, so that's going to be a seamless thing as the sun moves through the sky. Time-lapse is where you're going to be able to set those distances, right? So you can have an image, and then if you got to wait 5 minutes to grab the next one, you'll have that space between where the sun is and then where the next image is captured, so you'll actually be able to do a composite in post, and then do your blending that way. So that's what I would recommend, using time-lapse instead of live view composite. I wish the S5 2X dials were easier to see in low light. Do you know if adding watch lume, glowing pigment, to the engravings would void warranty? I don't know if it would void warranty. There is a possibility that I think it could be construed as something that could void the warranty, but I'm not an expert in that that side, so I wouldn't really be able to tell you yes or no. Truthfully, the camera, it's your camera. If you're gonna want to add something like that, I think I saw this comment over on Reddit the other day with a reference to someone who did it to their Leica camera. I think it can look really cool, but just always keep in mind that if you're doing anything to modify a camera, there is that potential risk. But if it's something that can be washed off or, rubbed off so that it's not in there, you got a little more leeway there. But just know that, when items like that get into a service department, if there's a challenge there, it's something that you just have to keep in mind. It could be flagged as a modification to the camera, so... How is the guest name spelled? Steven space Madow. Is Logitech part of the LMAT Alliance? Not that I'm aware of. I did see their announcement of the Mevo camera, which looks pretty cool. So that's definitely a cool introduction for the Micro Four Thirds cameras. Yeah. Let's see. Fielding, just got back from grabbing stuff from REI's sale for Eclipse camping. We'll have to rewatch once the stream is ended. Yeah, we're definitely gonna have that info there. It'll be up. I'm gonna try to make sure I get the timestamps for this one, but yeah. So for totality, G9 Mark II with 50 to 200 and 1.4 teleconverter, 7-shot, 1 EV bracket, tripod, high res. So like we were saying a little bit before, Fielding, probably not going to want to do high res because depending on the magnification in a case like that, you're out around, was it like 270 millimeter? I think with that combination, the sun is going to be moving relatively fast in your frame. So unless you can get a really fast shutter speed, it's going to be difficult to have the camera freeze that motion. The other thing is that the more an object is moving, the more the motion correction system works, which is where it's using adaptive resolution for the various pieces. So it may not give you as good of a benefit as you would want in a case like that, but it's something that I mean, where we're gonna be, we're having what, over 3 minutes worth of the actual totality there, so you've got time for it, so maybe you can try it. But I would definitely make sure to prioritize more like the 7 shots with 1 EV. And like Steven was saying, if you do set your exposure comp when you're doing the bracketing to like bias way down low and then bias way up high, you can then take those images, merge them in software in post, and get a much greater dynamic range than any camera is going to normally be able to capture with a single image. So let's see here. Chris, no idea. Thanks, Sean. It's different from focus limiter, right? Yes. Yeah. The near and far focus are different than focus limiter. These are programmable, and what they're doing is far focus or far AF on is going to tell the system to look out at the telephoto end first, or the infinity side of focus, and pull back towards subject. The near AF on does close focus to subject. So it just changes the point at which it uses to bring to the focus point. And if you're shooting through nets, that's where you're going to want to be, use far, because you want it to ignore what's up close. So, let's see here. Cliff, I colored vinyl tape marks on my S5 Mark IIX PASM dial. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of alternatives there. I know, for many, personally, I love the totally blacked out set. And I think if you use a camera long enough, you tend to get that muscle memory if you know which dial you're in, because if you're looking through the viewfinder or you're looking on the back of the camera, what I typically do is on the actual rear display, you'll see a PASRM on the bottom of the camera there. It's not the necessarily easiest thing for everyone to look at, but it's a reference that you can look at without having to necessarily look up at the dial to change through. So the screen does give you some indicators as to what mode you're in. Yeah, so bring back the 1.4 teleconverter for MFT. Panasonic Canada says discontinued, even no US retailer has them, citing no longer available. It's advertised for the new 100-400. Yeah, I've seen a lot of this. I've talked to my team about it. The teleconverters are not discontinued. I know dealers are, maybe they don't have inventory. That's why their listing is no longer available. The teleconverters are available. The US, I literally just ordered a couple of them internally because I needed them for a couple samples. So they are available. You have to tell your dealer that you want them to order it, and they have access to it. So let's just see. What are we tagging our LUMIX Eclipse shots? Hashtag LUMIX Eclipse. Oh, my G9 Mark II will be on a tracker. I've been practicing with a TO filter. Need to figure out my GX8 with a 9mm f1.7 time-lapse stills. Yeah, I mean, honestly, anyone that goes out there, goes out and captures the Eclipse, definitely tag at LUMIX USA and the at LUMIX global account if you're posting them up on Instagram. We would love to see those photos and share them out. I like the idea of hashtag LUMIX Eclipse. It's a pretty nice, easy way to find images. But yeah, Cliff says, any big plans for NAB next month? Not really that I'm aware of. Definitely, Matt and I will be out at NAB. So if anyone's going to be out at that show, definitely stop by the booth. We will be at the typical Panasonic booth. So we are with our Panasonic Connect division, which is our PTZ cameras, things like that. So definitely, if you're going to be there, swing by, say hi to us, check out the cameras that we'll have on display. And yeah, it should just be another fun show. I think it's Eli. I think it says, I love the blackout too. Just think having it glow would look cool. And be helpful. Yeah. The photos I've seen of the Leica camera that had the kind of the glow paint put into the engraving does look very cool. But like I said, in the end, it's your camera. If it looks cool and it works for you, there's not really anything that we would say no to. I understand the warranty concerns with stuff like that, though. B&H McCary says B&H cannot get them anymore. Which secret supplier sells them? I can tell you for certain that we have them, and we would sell them to B&H if they ordered them. Yeah, I don't know how much more I can tell you. That they exist. If they're ordered, we can get them, and we can provide them if need be. Yeah, let's see here. Do you have a preferred intervalometer, shutter release, or just prefer in camera? I use the in camera intervalometer. Honestly, I've used third-party ones. Like, I don't think I have quick access to the one that I've used. Yeah, it's not in my drawer. I've used them before because if you use an external intervalometer, that's where you can get some like cool stuff, because you can use an external intervalometer to trigger stills for the like high-res mode. It's one of the creative ways you can get around doing high-res mode with an external converter for it. But yeah, that's kind of where that is. What's the model for the 1.4? I can see DMW STC14 unique photo. STC14 is going to be the full frame 1.4 teleconverter. DMW TC14 or TC20 are the micro four thirds. Now there may be a letter after them because they were revised throughout the production life. But yeah, it's DMW-TC20 for the 2X converter. So, well, awesome. Thank you everybody for tuning in and the awesome questions. I want to again thanks to Stephen Madow for jumping on the stream with us live from down on NASA's facility for the rocket launch. I encourage you to follow Stephen, check out his work. He's got some really awesome images and captures of the various rocket launches. Some amazing access that he's got for some of these images. Yeah, we will be back live again next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time here on YouTube. So if you set reminders, subscribe to the channel, all that kind of fun stuff, it helps us out tremendously. I hope you all have a good rest of your day, and I hope you all have an awesome weekend. And yeah, I'll see you next Thursday, 2 p.m. Thanks, everybody.